At the 2002 Breeders' Cup, 3 frat brothers won $3 million. The 3 guys at the heart of this horse race scam are Chris Harn, Glen DaSilva, and Derrick Davis. They're a trio of frat bros who met at Drexel University in Philly during the late 90s. They were all members of the campus fraternity Tau Kappa Epsilon, and they still kept in close contact after graduating from Drexel. DaSilva went to New York City, Davis wound up in Baltimore, Harn, with a degree in computer science in hand, took his talents to Newark, Delaware. By 2001, Harn had worked his way up to being a senior computer programmer at America's leading collector of horse race bets, a company called Autotote. As a senior employee at Autotote, Harn could tap into 65% of all the bets placed on horse races around the country, and his distinguished position made him something called a super user, the highest level of access at the company. Harn's high-powered career did more than offer him a nice salary and place to use his computer skills. It also gave him an inside look at all the horse racing data that Autotote keeps in its system. One such data point was the sheer volume of racing bets placed by people looking for a payday at the track. You see, while horse racing has fallen a bit out of fashion in recent years, in the early 2000s, it was the second most watched sport in the United States behind baseball. $14.5 billion was wagered on horse races in 2001, and Harn wanted in on the action. He came up with a plan to get a small piece of that enormous pie when he found hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of unclaimed tickets in the Autotote system from people who hadn't yet cashed in their winning. All he had to do was print the tickets and claim the money at the racetrack. There was just one problem. As an Autotote employee, Ham was not allowed to bet on the races himself. Besides, he was a familiar face at all the local tracks and would have been recognized immediately. He needed someone else to cash the tickets in for him. Who better than his old college pals? With his friends on board, the plan was set into motion. Harn reprinted the tickets from the Autotote database through a clever computer program of his own design. This program compiled unclaimed tickets with a balance under $1,500 to steer clear of IRS detection. He then duplicated the tickets to remove any specific track identification from them. He printed the duplicates and sent them to Davis and DaSilva to withdraw the money. Those two made their way down to various tracks around New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania to cash in the stolen winnings, careful not to collect too much at any one track for a fear of generating suspicion. They kept this up for a little while and got their hands on more than $80,000 in unclaimed winnings, which they split between them. The scheme was successful. It yielded the extra cash that Harn was after, but he soon realized that it wasn't sustainable. What if some Joe Schmo from Kentucky went to cash in his real winning ticket and denied the money he rightfully won? If it happens one time, maybe he gets reimbursed and it gets swept under the rug. But if it starts happening consistently, people would start asking questions and the 3 amigos would likely be found out. So instead of watching the money trickle in through piles of unclaimed tickets, Harn and his trusty frat brothers decided to go after one single jackpot, one big payday, and then they'd walk away. The target was obvious: the Breeders' Cup, the richest day in horse racing, where people line up to get their share of the $31 million in cash prizes. It's one of the most important events in the sport, and while it's not quite as popular as, say, the Kentucky Derby, it does feature some of the most impressive thoroughbred racers in the world due to its strict breeding standard. There are 6 major races at the Breeders' Cup, and the reward for correctly picking the winner of all 6 is called an Ultra Pick 6. It's a wager rarely won by horse rate bettors because of the high degree of difficulty involved in picking the winning horse for 6 individual races. Still, it would result in the kind of lucrative prize they were pining after, so Harn decided to go for it. He hatched yet another plot to win him and his friends some cash. He did this after uncovering a flaw in the Autotote system. There was a 30-minute delay in the database's processing capabilities, a half-hour period between the end of the Cup's 4th race and the time when Autotote's computers received the wagers. If somebody could gain access to the company's servers during that 30-minute window, they could conceivably change their bets on the first 4 races to the actual winners. But who would be able to get into those computers? Maybe an Autotote super user? The plan was for DaSilva to place pick 6 bets for the 2002 Breeders' Cup. After the conclusion of the 4th race, he'd contact Harn and let him know the winners. Harn would go into his office, access the bets in Autotote system, and change the wagers to the right ones. Seems like a foolproof plan, right? The guys went through a couple of trial runs to be sure. DaSilva bet on races at Balmoral Park and Belmont Park to ensure Harn could pull off the scam on his end. Both dry runs were successful. and DaSilva walked away with nearly $200,000 from it. But they had their eyes on a much bigger prize, and with the confidence of 2 successful test runs under their belt, they set their sights on the upcoming Breeders' Cup. The trio sought a betting parlor that wouldn't catch wind of their scheme too easily, one with very little security and didn't require in-person betting. They found the perfect place in the town of Pomona, New York, the Catskills Hub. Not only did Catskills lack a strong security system monitoring its bets, but you could also open an account with them over the phone rather than setting one up in person. It was exactly what they were looking for, and better yet, Parlor didn't keep track of past transactions, so the paper trail to their scam would be neatly cleaned up on its own. Davis opened his own account at Catskills just in case the authorities started to get suspicious of DaSilva after he previously had 2 other big payouts. Everything was in order. All they had to do was wait for Breeders' Cup Day. When the fateful day finally came, the Drexel 3 sprung into action. Davis made his picks for the first 4 races. Then, to ensure he wins, he bet on every horse in the final 2 races, which is perfectly legal. Harn changed his first 4 bets. They'd be instant winners in total. The bet cost $1,152. Harn kept in close contact with him throughout the day, making several phone calls to him while the initial races were taking place. Harn used his genius hacking skills to remotely eject the backup security tape in Catskills to cover his track even further, so there'd be no record of his illicit activities. 4th race ends, and Harn's accomplice notifies him of the 4 winners. He dives into the Autotote computers and erases Davis's original bet, replacing it with the names of the correct horses. He then calls the Catskills Hub and claims to have accidentally ejected their backup tape while doing routine maintenance on the system. Another footprint covered. After the 2002 Breeders' Cup, the 3 frat brothers became millionaires. The scheme worked as smoothly as they could possibly have hoped for, and the result was $3.1 million. The payout was so large because of the winning racehorses. An American thoroughbred named Volponi went into the day with 43-1 odds to win. Nobody else bet on Volponi, so Davis's wager was the only pick 6 winner. The guys must have been thrilled, right? Well, not exactly. The unlikely odds that Volponi had to win made them a lot of money. However, it also made their bet on him look more than a little suspicious, especially since it helped them complete the already unlikely Ultra Pick 6. If one of the favorites had won, nobody would have batted an eye. Because the winner was a long shot and the resulting winnings were so massive, it raised some eyebrows, and the Arlington Park racetrack withheld their winnings until an investigation was launched. The New York State Racing and Wagering Board started looking into Davis's bet, trying to find any abnormalities that might exist. As their investigation began to pick up steam, Harn, Davis, and DaSilva realized they were in hot water. If they didn't get out ahead of the story soon, things might get ugly. So, rather than accept their grim fate lying down, they went on the offensive. Davis came out and demanded his winnings be given to him, playing the victim card in the press, hoping that he might get the court of public opinion on his side. He insisted he was innocent of any wrongdoing and challenged New York authorities to come forward with whatever evidence they may have against him. It didn't matter how defiant he was publicly. Privately, he and Harn both knew that their scheme was in serious danger of being uncovered. If that happened, all 3 of them would have some major consequences to face. It wasn't long before the first shoe dropped. Investigators had been looking into Autotote's system, trying to find some evidence that the database had been hacked on the day of Breeders' Cup. The company itself considered the possibility of an inside job and underwent thorough questioning of its entire staff. It was soon discovered that Harn was in the Autotote offices on the day of the race, even though he was not scheduled to work. If that wasn't suspicious enough, Autotote soon unearthed digital evidence in their system that showed Harn had manually changed Davis's bet in the middle of the event. Harn was immediately fired, and the company turned over its findings to the authorities. The snowball was officially rolling. Investigators looked for any connection between Harn and Davis. They found it in the 2 shared alma mater, Drexel University, and their involvement in Tau Kappa Epsilon fraternity. Once these dots were connected, the jig was pretty much up. Federal authorities also looked into Glen DaSilva's 2 dry runs at Balmoral and Belmont, and he too was implicated in the investigation. Prosecutors had a rock-solid case against all 3 of them. They knew Harn was in his office when he wasn't supposed to. They traced the multiple calls he made to Davis's cell phone while he was there. They knew he altered Davis's bet, and they knew DaSilva's wins were rotten too. The horse race hustlers had no other choice but to fold. Harn decided to cooperate fully with investigators, admitting to his various misdeeds, including his unclaimed ticket scam, which prosecutors had no clue about. He pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit wire and computer fraud and conspiracy to commit money laundering. Because of his transparency with the feds, he was sentenced to just a year and a day in prison. On the other hand, Davis pleaded guilty but got smacked with a jail sentence of 37 months. DaSilva admitted his Balmoral and Belmont bets were rigged but denied any knowledge of Davis and Harn's Breeders' Cup racket. He ended up with 2 years in the slammer anyway. The $3.1 million jackpot they swindled was divided among 78 people who bet on 5 of the 6 winners. Guess it sometimes pays to lose, huh? At least when the winners commit gigantic financial fraud. The scandal led to sweeping changes in the betting industry. Companies that manage wagers, companies like Autotote, are now required to download the data from the racetrack immediately upon the race ending, getting rid of that pesky 30-minute delay that allowed Harn to do his thing in the first place. That means the scam was masterminded by the Drexel 3 truly can never be repeated. Click here to watch one of these next videos.